2024 was a wild year for tennis gaming. Two major releases shook the scene, but did they deliver the smash hit we've all been waiting for, or just a double fault? That depends on who you ask. Some might say it was a breakthrough year with exciting new developments. Others might argue it was a swing and a miss. But here's the thing, whether you loved it, hated it, or landed somewhere in between, 2024 was one of the most pivotal years for tennis gaming in over a decade. And that alone makes it worth talking about. In this video, I will break down the highs, the lows, and everything in between. We will go through the year's biggest events, dive into what worked and what didn't, and explore what it all means for the future of tennis gaming. So, let's serve up the story of 2024 in tennis gaming and see where we stand heading into 2025. Let's kick things off with the release of TOPSPIN 2k25. If you've been into tennis games for a while, you've probably heard of the TOPSPIN series. It's legendary. A lot of us have great memories of playing TOPSPIN 4 back in the early 2010s with our friends. And some even swear by TOPSPIN 3 for its more simulation-heavy vibes. Either way, this series has been a big deal for tennis gaming fans. But here's the thing, we've been waiting forever for a new TOPSPIN game. The last one, TOPSPIN 4, came out in 2011, the same year as Skyrim, Battlefield 3 and the first Dark Souls. Yeah, it's been that long. And since then, the tennis gaming scene has been pretty dry. So when we heard about TOPSPIN 2k25, the hype was real. Well, sort of, because while there was definitely excitement, there was also a heavy dose of skepticism. Over the years, 2K has built a bit of a reputation, and not the good kind. Stuff like greedy microtransactions in NBA 2K and lackluster game quality had people worried. So yeah, it was a mix of hope and dread. Then April rolled around and the game dropped. And as usual these days, critics and gamers didn't exactly see eye to eye. Critics were loving it, calling it the best tennis game on the market, praising the risk versus reward gameplay, detailed player models and the overall feel of the game. It even snagged a decent 76 rating on Metacritic. But gamers? Well, not so much. The Steam reviews were split right down the middle with a 50-50 ratio, and let's just say the complaints were quite loud. Turns out, a lot of the stuff that critics praised wasn't all that great. Player models? Pretty rough. The content? Bare bones. The roster? Laughably small. And the gameplay? Full of imbalances and flaws. People were especially annoyed that it felt just like a reskin of TOPSPIN 4, only worse. Despite the issues though, the game did okay numbers-wise. TOPSPIN 2k25 hit a peak of 3,700 concurrent players on Steam. Now, that might not sound like much, but for a tennis game, that's actually pretty solid. Most tennis games barely break into the hundreds, so these numbers were quite alright for the genre. After launch, the studio kept things moving with new seasons. Each one brought a season pass, some gameplay tweaks, and a single new player. First, we got Jannik Sinner, then Caroline Garcia, and finally Alexander Zverev. While Sinner and Zverev are excellent additions, this lineup was not what fans were hoping for. I mean, people wanted Nadal or Djokovic and got Caroline Garcia instead. No shade to her, she's great, but she's not exactly a roster addition that's going to excite most fans, is she now? And the gameplay updates, well, they didn't do all that much to fix the core issues. And online play? Still a mess. Over time, it became pretty clear that 2K wasn't putting much effort or budget into this game. It felt like they were just keeping it on live support. Now, as we are heading into 2025, any hope of 2K turning this thing around is pretty much gone. The game is what it is, and it's not getting any better. Last season update did not even have a new player added to the roster. So they are not even pretending to be trying anymore. Honestly, it's hard not to worry that this might be the end of the line for TOPSPIN. Maybe not forever, but definitely for a long time. Alright, now let's shift our gears and talk about Tiebreak. This was another big 2024 release for tennis gamers, and it came from Big Ant Studios. If that name rings a bell, it's probably because they've made tennis games before, like AO Tennis 2 and Tennis World Tour. But with Tiebreak, they decided to shake things up a bit by launching it in early access back in January 2024. Now, I didn't hop on the Tiebreak train until Early Access 5, which I think dropped around May. By then, the game showed promise. It had some of the best graphics we've ever seen in a tennis game, and a roster of over 60 players already back then. Pretty impressive for early access. The gameplay wasn't great, but it was easy to think, hey, they've got time, this could shape up into something really good. But unfortunately, that wasn't how things went. For every step forward, it felt like the game took 2 giant leaps backwards. Patches would fix one issue, but introduce a bunch of new problems, usually in the core gameplay. The closer we got to the official release in August, the more skeptical I got. I mean, by the last early access update, a month before launch, the game still had so many unresolved issues. And let's be real, a month isn't enough time to turn a struggling game into a polished one. My gut told me the release wasn't going to go well, and unfortunately I was right. When Tiebreak hit version 1.0, it was a complete mess. I am not exaggerating here. Like, basic stuff wasn't even working in the game. Leveling up your player in career mode? Nope. The AI? Broken. Stats? They didn't work properly. Shot balance? Non-existent. I could go on, but I bet you get the idea. If you want all the gory details, I covered it in my full release review. Honestly, it was heartbreaking. The game had so much potential, but it felt like they nailed the expensive stuff, like graphics and licensing, only to drop the ball on literally everything else. And then there was marketing, or should I say, the lack of it. Nacon, the publisher, did absolutely nothing to promote this game. On Steam, the all-time peak for concurrent players was just 127. 127. For context, Pro Cycling Manager 2022, a niche game if there ever was one, had a peak of 3,500 players. Ouch. At that point, I pretty much gave up on Tiebreak. Big Ant Studios has a history of pumping out flawed games and then abandoning them to work on the next thing. I was convinced they would do the same here, but here is where I have to eat my words. A small group of diehard fans stuck with the game, and, to my surprise, Big Ant Studios didn't just leave it to rot. They actually kept updating it. From August through December, they released patch after patch, slowly but surely fixing a lot of the game's problems. Now, as of the beginning of 2025, Tiebreak is, well, it's fine. It's a functional tennis game, and if you are into arcade-style gameplay, you might even enjoy it. But if you are a fan of simulation tennis, then forget it. This game just isn't for you. And honestly, I think this is as good as it's going to get. The game's director said in December that the last patch was, quote, the last patch for a while. Maybe they will drop more updates down the line, or maybe they are already moving on to Tiebreak 2. Which seems to be at least in the planning stages. For me personally, Tiebreak was the biggest letdown of 2024. I went from being super excited during early access to completely let down at launch, and now I'm just indifferent. It's a shame because it could have been so much more. Alright, now let's talk about the last big thing for tennis gaming in 2024. The release of Tennis Elbow 4 on consoles. So far this review of the year was pretty grim, right? But luckily Tennis Elbow 4 was a bright spot for tennis gaming. If you've never heard of Tennis Elbow 4, it's this indie tennis simulator that's all about realism. It's been in early access on Steam since 2021. But 2024 was the year it finally broke into the console market. It launched on Xbox in June and then hit PlayStation 4 and 5 on November 11th. Now, I got the chance to cover the PlayStation launch on my channel, and let me just say, Tennis Elbow 4 became my favorite tennis game of the year. Here's the thing. TE4 is made by a single developer, but it somehow manages to capture the essence of tennis better than pretty much anything else out there. The more time I spend with games like TOPSPIN and Tiebreak, the more I realize just how much Tennis Elbow 4 nails the fundamentals of the sport. Stuff like unforced errors, the balance of risk and reward, and the physics of the ball, all the little details that make the tennis feel like tennis are done here so well. So when it finally made its way to consoles, I was thrilled. More players could finally experience what makes this game so special. Unfortunately, we do not have solid numbers to see how well it's done on consoles. No sales figures, no player stats, nada. But we do have PlayStation ratings, and let me tell you, Tennis Elbow 4 is crushing it there. It's the highest rated tennis game released in 2024 on PlayStation Store, rocking an impressive 4.57 rating. For comparison, Tiebreak sits at 3.47 and TOPSPIN a measly 3.05. That said, TE4 does have the fewest ratings overall, which probably means it hasn't sold as many copies. Not super surprising though, it's an indie game with zero marketing budget and it only dropped in November. Still, even with the lower visibility, it's amazing to see a game like Tennis Elbow 4 getting the recognition it deserves. If you haven't checked it out yet, you're seriously missing out on one of the most authentic tennis experiences out there. And that's pretty much the wrap up for tennis gaming in 2024. Honestly, last year felt like a tale of two major releases that had opposite problems but ended up in the same disappointing place. On one hand, TOPSPIN failed to connect with its existing fanbase. It wasn't necessarily a terrible game, but the lack of ongoing care and effort from the developers left it feeling hollow. On the other hand, Tiebreak had developers who were clearly trying. They kept pushing out updates and patches, but they just didn't seem to have a solid vision for what they were building. And, well, let's be real, they just didn't have the skill to pull off a great tennis game. The problem with both of these games is that they don't feel like they were made by people who love tennis, and that sucks. My bigger worry is that these two releases might scare off other companies with bigger budgets from even attempting a tennis game in the near future. I mean, if I were a gaming company's executive looking at the likely financial disasters of TOPSPIN and Tiebreak, I would probably say no thanks as well. But here's the thing, if anyone just made a really great tennis game with solid gameplay, good visuals and proper licensing, I know people would buy it. As it stands, we are in 2025, and for those of us who want an actual tennis simulation, we are still stuck with two options, Full Ace and Tennis Elbow 4. Don't get me wrong, they are great games in their own right, but they are indie titles with limited budgets and technical constraints. What we are missing and have been missing for years is a Pro Evo 21 level tennis simulation. Something with the polish and production value of TOPSPIN or Tiebreak, but with the gameplay depth of Tennis Elbow 4 or Full Ace. Sadly, I don't think Tennis Elbow 4, as much as I love it, will ever fill that void. It's just not designed to be that high budget, high production value experience. Still, I'm glad that we saw some movement in the tennis gaming scene in 2024. This genre was way too stagnant, especially when it comes to higher budget releases. So, here's hoping 2025 delivers a high budget tennis game that finally gives us exciting gameplay and everything else we've been craving. So, how do you view 2024? Has it been a good year for your tennis gaming experiences? Have you had fun? Let me know in the comment section. Anyway, that's all from me in this video. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.